Hi, this is Rui once again. This will be my second tutoring session. I hope that this tutoring session will be helpful in order for you to prepare for your exams. If you have any questions, you can contact me at any time. You have my email address. So I'll be continuing the topic that I started last week, which is the spectrum of competition. I have it right here in a graphical form. So we'll start where we left off last time in the factors of production. The factors of production is whatever a firm needs to produce. So they are the inputs of production for a particular firm. We'll assume that the market for the factors of production is a perfectly competitive market. And so on the long run, there will be no economic profits, meaning that the price of the factor of production will equal the value of the factor of production for each individual firm. In the case of labor, the price of labor is the wage that the company pays, and the value will be the additional revenue in terms of dollars that this person will bring, this person will produce. The demand curve will be obviously downward sloping because an increase in the price of labor, an increase in the wage, will lead to a lower demand for labor, for employees. Now, there is an important distinction that firms make, which is the short run and the long run. For short run decisions, we usually assume that the only variable that companies can change is labor. All the other factors of production will be fixed in the short run. And so we will have the company's decision will look something like this. So because on the short run, all the other factors of production will be fixed, the only input that we can change is labor. So the amount that we produce will be directly tied to the amount of labor that we employ on the short run. And in here, in this graph, we can see the relationship between output and the amount of labor that we employ. So in here, this is incorrect. The label should be labor, not output. So we can see as we increase the amount of labor, then the additional revenue that this additional amount of labor will bring us, in the beginning, it will be growing. And this is what we call increasing marginal returns, meaning that on average, each employee will be producing more and more as we increase the number of employees. But there is an inflection point, and from this point onwards, increasing the number of employees will not increase their average production, meaning that we are increasing the number of employees, but the amount that on average each one of them will produce will be lower, and actually be lower and lower as we increase the number of employees, as we can see here. In terms of short-term decisions, the company should hire employees up to the point in which the marginal costs will equal the marginal revenue. The marginal cost of employing one additional employee is the wage. So employing one employee will have a fixed cost, which is the wage. So it will always be the same cost. But the revenue will not be so straightforward. As we can see here, the revenue will have this kind of shape. As we employ one additional employee, the additional revenue that this employee will bring depends on the output and depends on the amount of labor. So the more output, the more we produce, the more labor we have, the more employees we have, the less will be the additional revenue that an additional worker will bring. This is what we call decreasing marginal returns. Now, the shape of this long-run average cost curve will actually give us two important pieces of information. The first is how many firms will compete in a particular industry. And this information will be given by the shape of this curve. So if the curve is a bit like this one, has a flat bottom, then there will be no optimal, only one optimal amount of production, of output, meaning that the companies can choose freely to produce how much they want, provided that it's on the minimum of this curve, meaning that a company can choose to produce somewhere around here on this arrow, or the company can choose to produce close to Q4, and they will both have the same average cost. So they will both be able to compete in the same market, although they will have very different sizes. I mean, a company that produces Q4 will have the double of the size of a company that produces here on this arrow. But still, they will be able to compete. So the shape will actually determine the number of the size of the firms competing in the same industry. So a curve like this might mean that the companies will have very different sizes, although they will be able to compete. But if the curve would be something like a V shape, then that would mean that there is only one optimal amount of production, and that will be the minimum of the average cost. And if that's the case, then all the companies will have the same size, because they will all be producing in the minimum of the long-run average cost curve. They will all choose to produce the same amount, the same output, the same quantity. They will all have the same sizes. Now, if you combine this piece of information with the demand for this particular market, you will have, you can take another conclusion. You will try to forecast how competitive this market will be. So for instance, if the demand crosses the long-run average cost curve here on the economies of scale part, this will mean that the quantity demanded will be not very much, right? It will be here on this arrow, meaning that only one firm is likely to exist in this market, because this one firm can take advantage of the economies of scale to produce at the minimum average cost possible. If there will be two firms, they will both be producing at higher costs, because you need to have some certain amount of production in order to have economies of scale. So having one firm can actually be the most efficient scenario in this case. But if the demand curve crosses somewhere around here in Q4, for instance, then that would mean that we could have probably two firms competing in this market. So probably we'll have a natural oligopoly. Because once again, you need to have some minimum amount of production in order to have economies of scale, and in order to reach the minimum of the long-run average cost curve. And so it will be only efficient. The most efficient will be to reach the minimum of this curve, which you can get somewhere around here, right? If the amount demanded is this much, is Q4, and if the minimum amount of production for a particular company to be efficient is somewhere in the middle, then this would mean that we will probably have two companies producing this much. We'll have a natural oligopoly or a duopoly. And only if the demand curve is far to the right, somewhere over here, then only in this case you can have monopolistic competition or competitive market, because only in this case all the companies will choose to produce somewhere around this part of the line. And in order to have monopolistic competition and perfect competition, we need a lot of producers, a lot of firms producing the same product. And this will only be possible if the demand for this market is big, is substantial. Only then we can have a lot of firms producing this output, this much output. There needs to be market demand for it.